as I've said for the second time today, my second podcast I've recorded today, this podcast is being filmed before a live studio audience, hopefully. Who knows? It is 9 o'clock on a Friday night. So if people from the Be Better world are tuning in, go you. As ever, thank you for tuning in and welcome back to any regular listeners. I do bump into a few of you every now and then, and you tell me that you listen to the podcast. So if that is you, thank you so much. And as I am frequently saying as well, I listen to some fairly big podcasts on the global scale, and they seem quite happy to be begging for likes and subscribers at the beginning of all their episodes. So if you're listening in and you've listened to a few of them, give us a like, give us a review. It will help us undoubtedly into the future. But anyway, enough about me. Let's get into this latest episode. Really, really cool guest today. And I think we're going to cover a lot of interesting grounds around some very deep topics, because we've already had a bit of a chat before, not that long ago. So my guest today is Andrew Thornton. G'day, Andrew. How's it going?
Good day, good evening, good morning. So
Yeah.
It's good morning from London to good evening in New Zealand.
In New Zealand. We are covering the world. So we connected through a mutual connection through my father. So Tony Stratton, I don't know if he's going to be listening. I don't know. We should send him a copy of this and tag him in it.
We should.
But so a gentleman called Tony Stratton, he used to work with my dad back in the day, in the world of advertising and marketing in the sort of 70s and 80s. And you and Tony,
he worked with me back in the day in the 80s. So that's how I've known Tony for nearly 40 years, actually, believe it or not. So giving my age away here.
Yeah. I saw something on social media today. 2050 is closer to today than 1990 is, and you sort of go, yeah, it is, isn't it? That's quite scary, because 2050 sounds very much in the future compared to 1990, which feels like it was maybe yesterday. So we got introduced to this mutual connection, and I think when Tony sort of said, "Oh, do you know this guy Andrew Thornton?" I was like, "I'm afraid I don't, but I'll check out his website." And I was like, yeah, I think Andrew Thornton's the kind of guy I'd like to get to know, because you do some very cool stuff, which we'll hear about in a second. But yeah, I think very aligned with sort of my sort of thoughts and opinions about purpose and meaning and all the rest of it. But rather than me butchering, badly describing what you do, just explain to us, who are you? What do you do? What is your business, heart in business, all about?
Well, I'm a heartful entrepreneur, if that's a description. Or I do describe myself as a visionary heart surgeon. That's another term. Nice. I'm not medically trained, but I suppose my view on life is that we need more open hearts in business, and that if more business leaders were to approach their business in an open-hearted way, then the world would be a better place. And what I mean by that is to be more caring about people, connecting with people, seeing people for individuals, not as a mass, body of things. And the term human resources really bugs me, HR, because it suggests that we've got human resources, we've got cash resources, we've got stock resources, and it sort of dehumanizes us. And I've gone on a journey over the last 40 odd years from a profit-focused entrepreneur to a heartful entrepreneur. So that's my sort of headline, and that has involved all sorts of things along the way. My focus at the moment, until a few years ago, I was running a heartful supermarket. I had a midlife, having started my career at Mars, which is where I met Tony. I worked then with Ogilvy, the advertising agency, and run a consultancy myself. I then had a midlife crisis and bought a couple of supermarkets in North London, as you do when you have a midlife crisis. And I realized with hindsight, I bought those to develop and prove the principle that you could run a business from the heart and what that looked like, rather than one that was just about short-term profits. And to allow me, and anybody who's ever worked in retail, it's all consuming. So to allow me to focus on spreading the word, writing a book, which I should, of course, if I was properly prepared, have one right in front of me, but I have to reach under my desk and pull it out, putting the heart back into business. So I sold the supermarket business 2.5 years ago. and focused on working with business leaders at the moment, and also involved in, a possible acquisition of another organization, which we're going to turn into a Heartful business with a group of others. So that's my quick summary.
Nice. Yeah, I couldn't agree more about your thoughts on HR. I remember working for a large multinational company, and I had to go and have a meeting with someone from HR, and I just remember, them saying, "I know, we're here for you," and I'm like, "Well, you're not, are you? Because you're here for the company, because you're paid by the company, and you create the policy and the procedures for the company. You're not here for me." And she was kind of like, "Yeah, well, yeah." It's like, cool. Well, now we kind of know that's there's the elephant in the room. Yeah, it's interesting that we have become. Well, I'd be interested in your thoughts. Like, how did business? Well, I guess was commerce ever heart connected or connected to the heart? Do you think? And if it
Yes.
was, because I agree. Because one thing I look at, if we were back in, I don't know, well, I reflect on the fact that some people will have people listening in might have the name Fletcher or Cooper or Shoemaker, and it's like your name, you might have been named after the function that you provided to your community. And for me, that's the depth of connection we used to have as a business person. Was I am so connected to what I do that ultimately I am named after what I do and how I contribute to our community. So if we used to have that, I'd be interested in your perspective on how we used to have that heart connection, and then what happened. Like, where did it go? How did we lose it?
Well, our book is called Putting the Heart Back into Business. So that suggests there's a clue in the back. The original Quaker companies, Cadbury, Rantry, Barclays, Clark's Shoes, a lot of them formed in the UK, were really heartful businesses. So Joseph Rowntree invented the idea of the pension. He invented the idea of a staff canteen. He had houses for his workers because his view is, if I have a happy, healthy workforce, it's going to be better for my company. So none of these guys were just like do-gooding philanthropy sort of people. They were interested in running a successful business. And they saw, and it's really the B Corp concept. They saw, if I take care of all my stakeholders, so my supermarket, if I made sure they're really considered and thought about the people who work there, the team, and our customers, and the community, and our suppliers, and oh, by the way, we sort of try and take care of the environment as well, then what I saw, and it's proved in many, many documented case studies, is the shareholder, the sixth stakeholder, gets taken care of very well. In fact, there's a number of documented evidence that the shareholder actually does better than in the old classic profit model. And what happened? Well, it's interesting. In my book, I interviewed various business leaders. One of them was a guy called Justin King, who used to run Sainsbury's in the UK. And he had an interesting theory about the whole Quaker business. He called it the Kerplunk theory. Do you know the game Kerplunk, the kids' game, where you pull these straws out and marbles fall?
Yeah. I used to have that as a kid.
His theory, and I really get this, was that what happened with the Quaker companies, because they basically all got bought out and swallowed up into big multinationals, because they sort of lost their focus. And what he was saying is they kept on holding on to things. So in Kerplunk, you can pull one string out and no balls fall, and you can pull another one out and a whole lot falls. So they stopped distinguishing between the things that were relevant to do. So he used to run the food division at M&S. And M&S, until not too long ago, provide chiropody services for their employees. Now, that may have been a thing back 20, 30, 40 years ago. But, it's not the sort of thing that young kids say, oh, I'm going out to the chiropodist later on. It's it's just a thing that's kind of moved on. We've moved on from there. And I think he's right. There's a perspective that the Quaker companies didn't keep up with what was going on, didn't stay connected to today's stakeholders. They stayed a bit stuck in the past.
Yeah.
Therefore, a lot of them, for various reasons, ended up publicly listed companies, because at one point that was felt, if Joseph Rowntree the family want to get their way of doing things expanded across the world, then that they would list on the stock market. That's what you did. And then, of course, you lose control. So And I'm interested in the stewardship foundation model of ownership, which is like an employee ownership model, which has a golden share in it, so that nobody can change the structure of the company. So Joseph Rowntree probably would have himself been horrified that Rowntree's got listed on the stock market. But, you know, someone in the family somewhere along the way thought that was a good idea. So that's it. I think that's what happened, Tim. And it just seems, and it is a very much come from the US. A real, like, sort of, you know, it's all about short-term profits and profits. And it became an obsession. And there's you know, you talked about spirituality. You look at a bigger, broader way of being. There is us humans, we're either driven from a place of fear or a place of love. And the place of fear is all about scarcity. And gosh, I'm running this company. I don't have enough for me. I may have millions, billions in the bank, but, you know, I might run out. So people in a fear-based world, and we sadly live in a fear-based world now, people tend to get focused on themselves and scarcity, and greed tends to take over. And that, I think, is what's going on in the business world. Now, thanks to people like yourselves and the whole B Corp movement, more and more business leaders are saying, you know something, this whole fear-based way, profit-focused way is not working. And I believe enough business leaders are waking up to the fact that this is not the way forward. And my experience is mostly that happens through a personal crisis. So I had a midlife crisis. It was like, I'd founded this consultancy firm. We had 35 people. We were doing really, really well. And I remember sitting in my garden one Saturday afternoon, the sun was shining on the coast, the south coast of England, outside London, thinking, is this it? Is this as good as it gets? You know, I'm in my early 40s. I've got, you know, materially great things. I've got a couple of lovely kids, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, nah, this isn't it. There has to be more to life than this. And that was my sort of crisis moment. So it wasn't provoked by a tragic accident. And then I ended up getting divorced and buying some supermarkets, and stuff happened. But my experience is that business leaders I come across who are on this journey generally, and I know you and I've spoken about your aha moment. People generally have a moment where they go, shit, this isn't working anymore. I don't. And there's a Japanese concept called ikigai. I don't know if you've come across it, which is 4 concentric circles about life. What I love doing, what I'm good at, what I can be paid for, and what the world needs. And at the time I didn't know it, but ultimately in my consulting job, I was really good at it. And mostly I loved it, but that was starting to wane a bit. I was paid very well. In fact, I was paid better than I've ever been paid since. But did the world really need what we did? I didn't feel it did. It wasn't that we did bad work. We did things that were important, but it wasn't meaningful to me. And I got to the point where I thought, you know, there has to be something more. And this ikigai thing is, if you are in balance with all those 4 things, then you will be more fulfilled. There's something about the heart and the soul, which is beyond money. And money, you know, no study has ever shown that money makes people happy. No study of people working in companies, you know, why are you still working at the XYZ company? Money never makes it into the top 3, 4, 5 reasons why people are still working at the XYZ company. It's, I feel, you know, my manager supports me, or I feel the work we do is meaningful, or I have good friends at work, or I feel seen and heard by my colleagues, those sort of things. And going back to good old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, once there's a certain level of income where you've got the basic needs of, I've got a roof over my head, I can feed myself and my family, I've got clothes. Beyond that, the money really doesn't make you any happier.
Yeah, 100%. So much to unpack, but also that, you know, that I fundamentally agree with. And it's, I guess, a couple of questions. Yeah, I think that, you know, clearly that US influence. I did a bit of delving into this. There was a guy, Edward Bernays. I don't know if you come across him in your
No,
marketing days.
no.
So he wrote a book in the late 1920s called Propaganda,
Mm.
and in it he basically described exactly what you were saying, like the fear and desire. Like if you understand the emotions that control human beings, you can get them to do whatever you want them to do. And a lot of his work was taken up by the world of marketing because he basically mapped out. And I don't know if you've ever read any or sorry watched any of Adam Curtis's documentaries. He's another interesting guy. He's got a series called The Century of the Self. He unpacks how Edward Bernays created the modern consumer capitalist model. And the first
Yeah.
project he worked on was selling cigarettes, because the cigarette industry were in the 20s and 30s were like, hang on a minute, women aren't smoking. Like, we're missing out on 50% of the market here. So they said to him, can you help create a campaign that will get more women smoking? And so he hitched the idea of women's suffrage to smoking, and they branded cigarettes as liberty sticks. And the whole idea was like, as a woman, you know, take on this male role of smoking and kind of show the patriarchy, you know, that you're worthy of being able to be included. And you know, but then they also worked with advertising and industry groups. And so he was the guy who got doctors and the medical industry in the US to start promoting cigarettes as a health benefit for weight loss and anxiety. And you just kind of go, man, that is genius. And you can just see how that's like one example where if you're the person running that company and someone's like, hey, we can double your market and get you more money. It's interesting. It was kind of around that sort of post-war era that really seems to be where this real capitalist, you know, and I think it's a difference between, I think some people kind of go like making money is bad. Well, no, making money is not bad, but profiteering versus profiting, I think that's the thing. And it just say, I don't know, whether you know, like, was there a moment or a particular thing that just led business to just suddenly go, actually, like, because like you say, it's almost counter what humans are actually about at the deepest level. Like, we're built for contribution and service and connection and meaning. Yet it just seems to have captured the sort of the CEO class of people from like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when you know, the launch of all these consumer brands and products. It's like, yeah, how do we get a fridge in every house? How do we get a car in the hands of every human? Have you got any thoughts or done any research on the specifics of that?
No, I don't necessarily, and I'm not sure that it matters.
Yeah, it's like
It does
it's
matter.
happened. Yeah,
Happens exactly.
the horse
There
is
is this
bolted.
thing there's this thing about, I mean, profit's really important. So, you know, because without profit, then companies don't exist. So without profit in my supermarket, I mean, we did some amazing things. We really did show people that things could be done differently. So, for example, we were really aware of this crisis with plastic, for example. We came across an organization called A Plastic Planet, who's a social enterprise whose role is to help turn the plastic tap off, and because it's a real problem. We met them. We watched the film A Plastic Planet. Plastic Ocean. And if you've ever seen it, it's quite extraordinary. There's one scene where they take a submarine down to the deepest part of the ocean that's known to mankind, and humans can't go down the submarine. The pressure's too great. And at the bottom, it's lined with soft drink bottles, loads and loads and loads of plastic soft drink bottles. So we in our supermarket, our purpose was, we are the community supermarket that really care about people and planet. And I know you and I are aligned on this. Purpose is critical to this journey. And with that purpose, when Sean showed us this film, it was like, well, we've got to do something about it. So we launched a Plastic Free for campaign. We launched Plastic Free Zone. So in 10 weeks, we launched 1,800 plastic free products across our supermarket, which gave all our customers the chance to buy products plastic free. Now, in that action, we did it to help us contribute to less plastic, our customers to contribute less plastic. But mostly we did it to show the big supermarkets that there was a different way, and it wasn't as difficult as they said. And afterwards, Dave Lewis, who was running the Tesco business, so one of the biggest supermarket groups in well, the world, second or third largest in the world, said that we changed the relationship between supermarkets and plastics globally. And that was with, at the time, one shop in North London. Now, that links back to profit. If we weren't making a profit, we wouldn't have existed, so we couldn't have done that. So, and it's, as you said, profiteering is the problem, not profit per se. And yes, the drive to have a refrigerator in every house is motivated on one level from a good place, which is actually people can then, have food. Food doesn't rot.
Exactly.
They don't,
hygiene,
all sorts of
benefits. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I guess then you creep into the whole obsolescence thing. It's like, okay, we've sold you one fridge, but actually we kind of want to sell you a fridge every year, as opposed to, there's probably still someone of my, if my grandmother was still alive, but there are people of a certain generation who still have their original Kelvinator from the 1950s because it was built to last. I guess it's how it's sold and how it's packaged as much as what it is that's sold and packaged.
Yeah, and this is a heart versus head issue for me. Because if you look at the oil companies and you look at the people running the oil companies, everybody, it's irrefutably proven that extracting more fossil fuels from the earth is destroying the planet. We've got to stop doing it. If you operate, the people who run these oil companies, they're not bad people. They're, they've got daughters and sons and parents and friends, and they're pillars in their community. When one operates in the head, which is what so much of business is about, you can rationalize why you're doing things. You can rationalize that actually the world is better off as a result of oil. People they can travel more, they've got better qualities of life. You can rationalize everything. My approach is, well, you need to get people into their heart as well, because we have our head, we have our heart. In fact, there are four parts of us. There's the mind, the head. There's the physical body, there's the emotional body, and there's our kind of intuitive body. And most of business is done from the head. And then you're only saying, I'm only using a quarter of the resources available to me. And that quarter tends to allow one to rationalize taking a route, which is not a holistic route. So it might be great for ExxonMobil to keep extracting oil because their profits and their show her. But for the totality of all their stakeholders, it's not actually. And when BP became Beyond Petroleum instead of British Petroleum back 20, 30 years ago, the concept was absolutely perfect, but it wasn't real. It was a sort of bit of a clever marketing trick. Oh yeah, well, let's say we're doing all this stuff when we're not actually. So
yeah, I think that the big company question is one certainly comes up a lot in the B Corp world that I'm involved in. The whole Nespresso. How can Nespresso be a B Corp? How dare they? It's ruined the B Corp community, and it'll never be the same again. It's like, well, but isn't it better that they are in the community and now they're going to be held to account? And now, there's, I don't know how many people work for Nespresso, probably 1,000 or more around the world. Isn't it better that they all now know what B Corp is? And, there will be hundreds. I'm sure the majority of their team are now going, okay, actually, this is pretty cool. Like because I think this is the thing, like the concept of doing good and purpose is innate to us. And once you have an ability to connect to it, you don't tend to go back to the old way of thinking because it is more of a natural thing. So I think, that the big company thing, I was talking to Matt Sturbans, who is the guy who I interviewed this morning. Like he's really, really cool dude. So he was a professional skier, quit skiing. Well, when he was a skier, he launched his own product line because he wanted to have like an athlete-led product that he could use rather than something that an engineer designed. But he had his moment of like, hang on a minute, we're shipping all these skis everywhere, and like there's a ton of waste, and they're pretty environmentally destructive in terms of the production process. So he ended up connecting with this company, and they now make skis out of bioalgae, and so it's like practically zero waste, made out of a natural based polymer now instead of plastics and the rest of it. But he's trying to change the ski industry. But as we were sort of saying, like there's so much embedded sunk costs in the way BP has been run since whenever it was founded in like the early 1900s or whatever it was. It's like it's been set up as a monolith around this way of doing business, and it's hard to expect them to just overnight go, okay, boom, chop it all off. Sorry, everyone, you've all got no jobs anymore, because we're transitioning to this new way of doing stuff. But equally, as you said, there needs to be some authentic and genuine movement, not just, hey, we've done a rebrand. Oh, look, we're not as evil as, or we're not doing the bad things that you maybe think we are, but actually we kind of are. The good old greenwashing.
One of the best books I've read this year, non-fiction books, is Not the End of the World, which is a book written by a young, she's in her early 30s, data scientist called Hannah Ritchie, who's and she's basically saying, the subtitle of the book is, how can we be the first generation to build a sustainable planet? So what she's saying, and what I love about this book, is it's all data-based. So there's a lot of things out there that are stated as fact that aren't actually fact. And she's saying, to be sustainable, there's two aspects. One is how we care for the planet, and two is how we care for people. And she's putting both of them together. And people have sort of said, oh, well, but we used to be much more sustainable back in the pre-industrial revolution days. But 50% of kids didn't make it to the age of 5. The average life expectancy was 41 or something. And what she's saying is, you can't look at, you can look at both together, which is what the whole heart concept is about. It's about caring for people and planet. And I think that's, and a lot of, there's a lot of great innovation, like your friend in the ski industry. A lot of really cool things are happening with in all sorts of aspects of innovation. And her other thing is that the hair shirt method does not encourage. So if you say to everyone, look, you've just got to stop everything. Don't buy any new clothes. Don't buy any meat. Don't fly. Don't drive. People aren't going to do that. That's not good. That doesn't work. So you've got to engage people. So what we did with the supermarket, we engaged our customers on this journey of how can we be more sustainable? How can we use less plastic? And with the plastic as one example, our customers loved it because they were crying out. They all know that they need to use less plastic. Everybody knows we need to use less carbon. But how? Without giving up everything. So there's a massive opportunity. Paul Pullman, who used to run Unilever, in his most recent book, said this is the whole net zero thing is the biggest single business opportunity that's ever existed for businesses. The opportunity to reinvent yourself and create something that's much better for the planet, but also for people. So that's where I sit in that camp of being positive and not all doom and gloom, or not head stuck in the sand.
Very much the same. I think for the first couple of years when I had my midlife crisis and tried to work out what the hell is this all about and how did I end up in this industry, I used to sell medical devices, and I've said it a few times on the podcast, but the Bleeding Edge is a really harrowing documentary on Netflix that describes what that industry is like. And when it's almost like the stages of grief. First of all, you're angry, and then you're kind of I can't remember what they are in detail, but you kind of go through the anger, then the kind of disillusionment, or the and I think there's a lot of people in the world of business for good, or trying to create that change, who are still in that anger, that resentment phase, and people don't want to hang out with that. And I think that's the key, is to show not only doing good is actually good for you. It's not, you don't have to be dragged into doing this kicking and screaming. It's actually what you're going to get is better than what you had before. And I think that's so needed, because people don't want to hang out with angry people who are telling you, no, you can't do stuff. It's like, no, I'm not interested. I'm automatically putting a wall up. The psychology of behavior change. So, but
and it's interesting. I remember talking to a CEO of one of the top FTSE 100 companies not a few years back, and he was describing about an encounter with Greenpeace, and Greenpeace kept on coming and telling him, "Oh, we don't want you to do this. We don't want you." And he kept on saying, "Well, what do you want me to do? If you come back to me with some positive actions I can take in the position I'm in, I am really interested to hear about it." And he was struck. And this is maybe 10 years ago, so things have probably moved on a bit. But it's this thing about what are the positive, how can we create positive change? How can we engage people in something that's different? And I think in a company environment, it's all what we discovered when we in our supermarket, in the laboratory, we discovered a couple of things by we turned the supermarket into a laboratory. We tried all these different things. And the two biggest findings we had, both of which have been sort of researched by others, but we did them in an actual, we discovered them by trial and error rather than anything else, is the first is the importance of creating psychological safety. So what we found was that through the work we did, through how we were, through coaching, through having a set of values that we cared about, people felt safer. And when people feel safer, they're more creative, they're more productive. And in fact, a Google study in 2015 proved that. They looked at their teams all the way around the world, and the most effective teams were the ones at the highest level of psychological safety. And then the second thing we learned was about habits. So many, more and more companies have decent purposes now. Most companies have values, principles, and so on. But very few people live them. And that's because they don't have the habits. And what a habit is just a behavior repeated. So what we discovered was the importance of actually having habits in the supermarket. I remember talking with a big multinational who've one of their principles is about to live with integrity, and we started discussing about that because that's a principle lots of companies have. People want to live with integrity, and the process on habits that we've developed is, first of all, well, what's the habit you want to do? So if you want to live with integrity, what is a habit that you might want to implement to live with integrity? And it could be people can speak their truth. So that's a habit. So you say, okay, so we want to have the habit of people speaking the truth. The next stage is, well, what are the barriers to people speaking the truth? Well, the barriers could be it's not safe to speak your truth. It could be, I don't know how, you're my boss, you're doing something I don't think it fits with the values of our company, but I don't know how to tell you, because you're a fairly direct, powerful sort of person who, you might get upset if I said, I think you're stepping out of line. So then the next step in the process is say, okay, so if those are the obstacles, then what are the skills people need? And then how do you train people on those skills? So you can train people to have difficult conversations. You can create psychological safety. So these are the sort of steps you can take to actually deliver the habits. So those are the two biggest lessons we got out of the market experiment.
It's such a key thing because I used to work for a large multinational medical device company, and literally chiseled in stone on the wall behind the reception in one of their international head offices, they had what's called the credo, which was like, our number one priority is to look after the patients who are receiving our products. Our second priority is to the doctors, surgeons, nurses who are administering the medicine and products to our patients. Our third commitment or priority is to the communities in which they and we all work in. Our fourth priority is to make a profit. But in actuality, it was make a profit, make a profit, make a profit, make a profit, make a profit. Look, if we lose a few patients, let's try and make some more money. And that was really confusing for me as a new employee into the business. It's like, but that's on the wall, but you're not doing it. Like, am I the dumb one here? Like, am I being confused? And in a large company like that, where I was a graduate trainee, it's like, well, who do I go to sort of go, hang on a minute, this isn't.
Yeah.
And it's just, I kind of feel like that's a lot of companies, because like you say, typically it's kind of like, professionalism, integrity, customer focus. It's like, oh, great. Yeah, another, it's almost like the bullshit bingo on the, in the meeting room. It's like, almost like bullshit bingo on values. Oh, you've downloaded the same 5 values as 90% of other companies in the world. Go you. And then you don't even live up to those. And like you say, you don't have any mechanism to support the conversation around those values. And crazy. It's going back to like the Maslow stuff as well. That was because a lot of people don't know that obviously that he had, like, before he passed away, he had the updated version with the top level being transcendental purpose above self-actualization. Because I think a lot of people kind of go, oh yeah, you can be self-actualized and still be an asshole, and still only care. And in fact, you could argue that self-actualization is very internally focused. It's like, I know who I am, I know my place in the world, I know my worth, I know kind of what I'm good at, but it's a very selfish mode. And so yeah, a lot of people. Have you also come across a guy called Scott Barry Kaufman? He's kind of like taken Maslow's work, and he puts it into like a sailboat metaphor. So he sort of says, look, it's a bit clunky to say it's a hierarchy of, well, until my basic needs, you don't kind of like level up necessarily, because you can possibly not have your basic needs being met. You could be homeless but still be a self-actualized person. You could have no family. So he calls it like a sailboat with so you've got the boat, which I think is like the basics, like security, what have you, and then the mast and the sail. And he sort of describes it as like a functioning boat where everything's interactive, and it can be, if everything's running, as it should be, then the boat's sailing really good to a good destination. But if it's got a hole in the in the bottom, and the sails are ragged, and the mast at an angle, and the rudder's gone, then you're not going to go anywhere. I mean, I think the other question that sits in the back of my mind. So I had a good conversation with a mate of mine, Luke Ficini. He runs a B Corp in Australia called The Sponge. So if you, I think he's mainly branding and marketing stuff. So if you need some branding and marketing, give Luke a call. But he's of Muslim faith, and we had a meeting today, and he was like, "Oh," I said, "Hi, how's your day going?" He's, "Oh, to be honest, I'm pretty tired. I've been fasting all day. It's Ramadan," and I sort of said, "Oh, do you know, are there many other Muslim founder B Corp people that you know?" And he's like, "No, I don't think I actually know any." And I was like, "Well, because in New Zealand, I know of 2 B Corp founders who are deeply Christian, and it doesn't seem to be that there's many people of faith in the B Corp world, and sort of in the sort of the business for good sector. It's quite generally it seems to be quite a secular world. But we look at the history of purpose-driven business, Quaker-based, faith-based, humanitarian. Do you think that's also a link? The sort of the decreasing connection to spirituality and faith in general, was that almost like a proxy or an avenue in which purpose was being, put into the boardroom, put into the leadership, whereas now in a kind of secular, everyone for himself, post Reagan, post Thatcher, there's no such thing as society. I don't know. I guess there's so many things that probably were adding force. But yeah, do you think we'll see a resurgence maybe of faith or a new faith that will give us the basis, or can purpose become its own religion of some description? Lots of questions in there to unpack. Sorry.
Yes. I distinguish between faith, spirituality, and organized religion, because I grew up in Catholic Ireland, and the Catholic Church really, in my view, abused the power they had in Ireland. They kind of Ireland had been invaded by all sorts of people over the years, and Ireland got its independence in the early 1920s for the first time, really. And the church somehow stepped into the void there. So I think organized religion, I don't connect with spirituality and faith necessarily. There's a sort of blind faith there. I think what is important is to have some personal, and it's beyond purpose, I think. Some people call it a North Star, some connection. For me, I've got a connection. It's not with an organized religion, but I call it spirituality. I believe there's a greater, it's not just me and you as independent people in the world. There's some greater something going on there. We're all connected to each other. We're not independent beings. And that's what's important to me. And I think that more people look at the world that way. And I think if you were to look at it, if you were to interview 1,000 B Corp leaders about their faith and their spirituality, I think you might get a different answer than if you interviewed about them. Are you a practicing member of an organized religion, be it the Catholic Church or the Muslim faith, or a practicing Jew or something like that? I think that's, I think they're separate. And the one that I'm most interested in having a faith that is, a faith beyond just It's just beyond me and making as much money as possible. That's the one that's important. And I know many, many business leaders who have that, who are not like me or not part of any organized religion. And then there's some that are, and then that's absolutely fine. And that go to an organized church. And I have no issue with that. It's the sort of, it's the reason behind. It's the blind faith versus actually having something. And it does, you know, the whole thing, you know, growing up in Catholic Ireland, it influenced who I am. And a lot of aspects of it weren't so good, and you the whole sexual abuse scandals that went on. And I was fortunate to not to have been abused, but I grew up in a school where other boys were being abused, and that impacts you. There's no question about it. And that shaped me who I am as a person. And I think that shaped me to look at the importance of fairness. And sometimes companies, I believe, the less ethical companies, if you want to use that word, they abuse their power. They do. So, you know, you talked about your medical device company. I have no idea who it was, but I suspect there was abuse of power going on there. You're a young trainee, you've got a job, lots of people have got jobs, they've got mortgages to pay. So it's not dissimilar to the abuse that some of the churches have used over time. That shaped me on my whole thing about life is about fairness. So the reason I've gone down this path in business rather than well, I'll use my talents to make a shitload of money and much money as possible is because, I believe in, because of my background and my upbringing, I believe in a fairer world. So we're all impacted by our childhood. And one of the big things we do working with business leaders is helping people to understand that, the impact, and processing it, and and integrating it into that rather than running away from it. Because what we learn is we learn coping strategies when we're kids. You know, your father says, "Oh, you know, big boys don't cry, Tim." Yeah, so you think, "Oh, right, I've got to be a big boy, I can't cry," and then you develop a strategy of not getting emotional. And what do to avoid that? You start drinking, or you start smoking, or you start whatever. You start moving away from who you are as a human into this creature with all these faces and facades and so on. And a lot of the work I do with business leaders is helping them peel that back to their true authentic selves.
The old persona, the mask, as it was called in was it in Greek? In the plays and the tragedies, like the persona was the mask that people wear. And today you say, "Oh, he's got a good persona or personality." It's all kind of linked to that. And I think this is the sort of the part. Do you know or have you heard the quote from Gus Speth? He's the environmental lawyer who talks about, I'm going to paraphrase it badly, but I'll put it in the show notes. He basically sort of said, look, I used to think that with 30 years of good science, we'd be able to solve, climate issues, biodiversity loss, species decline. He said, I've realized that actually it's not that. It's about selfishness. It's about greed. It's about apathy. What we need is a spiritual and consciousness awakening to get people. And I think this stuff is the stuff that I think is really going to drive the change. Like, sure, legislation, supply chain pressure. Hey, you guys need to be better at reporting your social environmental impact. Hey, yeah, you're gonna carrot and stick. Yeah, we'll beat you with a stick until it breaks and we'll throw the carrot at you.